goodness. And we are live. I believe we're live on YouTube, but not Facebook. Welcome, everybody. We are excited to have the first Unfiltered live on Thursday night. Everybody, as you can see, to my upper right, I think, on your screen is Alex. You know that face, but you may not know the face beside him. Alex, who is that beside you?
This is my beautiful wife, Lizzie. Lizzie
All right.
Pickle. So, yeah, we've been married for, 11 years now. So, I got two beautiful kids. So, and I'm proud that she, agreed to get on here with us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm the reluctant podcaster.
Well, Lizzie, we are so happy to have you. I know your dad's excited that you're with us tonight, at least.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then below that, we have Pastor Cary Ducket from Akron, Ohio. Pastor Cary is the president of the International Welcome Center in Akron, Ohio. He's also a pastor of Grace Bible Church there in Akron. Pastor Cary, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh my goodness! Well, I'm an Alabama boy. I grew up in Birmingham, and then 2007, me and my wife and our two sons were called to Sacramento, California, and we pastored there in California for almost 9 years, and then from there we came to Akron, Ohio, and we've been here since 2014 at Grace Bible Church. So now there's 6 of us. We have adopted 2 sons since we moved to Ohio. So our family grew by adoption.
Wow.
Wow.
That's pretty special. You know, they say that you can divorce your natural-born parents, but once you're adopted, that's it. There is no going back.
That's right.
That's awesome.
That's right.
That really shows the heart of God. That's awesome.
Yeah.
God's
Well,
been
guys,
good to
tonight
us.
we have told you. We're going to talk about immigration. I know some of y'all don't like that topic, and to be honest, we're kind of iffy about it. But that's why we brought Pastor Cary here, because he deals with people who are refugees from other countries almost every day, and the issues that they face. So, Pastor Cary, from a learned perspective, tell us what immigration actually is, as opposed to what we're hearing on the news every day.
For sure. No, that's a great question. So when you encounter a person who is not from America, they're one of 4 statuses, I guess. They're in one of 4 statuses. One, they could be a refugee. A refugee is someone who is invited to the United States. No refugee shows up here without being invited by our country to be here. If they're not a refugee, they could be an immigrant. An immigrant is an individual who chooses to come to our country, and so they seek the proper paperwork to get here. They get permission to come, and so they come to the United States, and usually they're here on a visa or some type of pass that they've received from the government, and again, they're here legally. If they're not a refugee or an immigrant, they could be an asylum seeker. So an asylum seeker is someone who enters our country without permission, but they actually want to get caught. They actually want to tell the authorities that they're here because they're seeking a time in court to be here legally through that process. And then there's a 4th group. So you've got refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, and then the last group is the one that really gets the most headlines, is what we call our undocumented immigrants. Undocumented immigrants are individuals who come into our country without the proper paperwork, and they don't want to get caught either. And so they start a life here without the proper paperwork. So you have these 4 different categories of an immigrant. But unfortunately, what happens is that they're kind of all lumped together. So when people start talking about immigration, they don't make this distinction between these 4 categories, and all 4 of them are on a separate path. And in a nutshell, that's about as simple as I know how to explain what immigration is in the United States.
Well, thank you for that explanation. That explains a lot about what is going on in our country, I believe. I know that immigration has been in the news. Our president has been talking about immigration and immigration policy. And most of the time, to correct me if I'm wrong, when they say immigration, we're talking about undocumented immigrants or illegal immigrants is the phrase that's used.
Usually, and that's what I mean by it all gets lumped. All four categories kind of get treated the same, even though they're all here on they all got here various different ways and for different reasons. And when you look at a refugee, that's the group that I primarily work with, is refugees. So refugees never walk into our country, never. They fly in. The government, they've been vetted first by the United Nations, and then they're vetted again by our government. And typically a refugee, the average weight prior to 2025, the average weight was 8 years. So a refugee that comes to the United States has, on average, been waiting in a refugee camp for 8 years to get here. And what's crazy is they didn't choose to come here. They didn't choose America. America chose them. And so that's rarely ever talked about. So I didn't know all of this. I had to learn all of this when I started getting involved with serving the refugee population. But basically, the way a person becomes a refugee, something horrible happens in their country. Civil war, famine, some type of purging or political purge that's taking place. So they flee their country, typically by foot, and they enter into another country, and that country sets up what we call refugee camps. And so once they're inside that refugee camp, there's UNICEF, there's organizations from the United Nations, there's Red Cross. Basically, they start vetting these individuals and to determine their story. Are they truly a refugee? Can they return home without being killed or thrown in prison or something horrible happening to them? Once it's determined they truly are a refugee, they can't go home, then they receive what is called a refugee status. And there are 24 countries in the world. Well, there were 24. There's 23 right now. There were 24 countries in the world that received refugees. The United States was one of them. And in 2025, we stopped. So that's what took it down to 23. Okay. And so, again, these countries look at this huge list. There's millions of refugees in the world. These 24 countries would look at this list, and they choose who they want to invite to their country.
How does that process work, Pastor Cary? As far as them choosing, is it about country-based, or is it the population? Is it the culture? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a combination of all of those things. Basically, we're looking, many times it could be their skill set. What kind of skill set do they have? It could be, do they, a medical condition that can only be resolved here in the U.S.? Do they already have family here in the U.S.? Sometimes that's a big thing they consider. They also look at cities in the United States where there's a lot of manufacturing, and those cities need people to come and fill those manufacturing jobs. And so they're looking many times for individuals that have that kind of skill set where they could come and do those manufacturing jobs to keep our own manufacturing industry healthy here in the U.S. So all of those things will tie in together as to how they choose who comes. There are 12 organizations that the federal government uses to resettle refugees in the United States. 2 of those 12 organizations are faith-based. The rest of them are just organizations that are trying to help refugees. But 2 of them are faith-based. That's World Relief, and then Bethel Christian Ministries. They just started right before 2025. They jumped in and started receiving refugees also. So these 12 organizations, they receive these refugees, And so the refugee doesn't even know what state they're going to live in. They don't get to choose that. They don't get to choose what city they're going to. All of that, they're assigned all of that. And so then they go. So like a refugee that's assigned to Akron, Ohio. Here in Akron, Ohio, we have two organizations that resettle refugees. One is called the uh, Akron. Oh my goodness, it's the International Institute of Akron, is what they're called. And then there's us, the International Welcome Center. And so we're an affiliate of World Relief. And so in 2024, we resettled approximately 80 individuals here in the Akron area, and that was just our first year to do it, to resettle refugees. And later on, I can tell you what we were doing before we were resettling them. But so they end up here in Akron, and for 90 days, they would get federal assistance for the first 90 days that they're here, and then after that they're on their own, and they can live anywhere in the country. They do not have to stay where they were placed, but many of them don't have cars. They don't know the language. They don't have a lot of money. They're trying. Many of them have kids. They're trying to get them established in school. So moving from where you are settled to another place, unless you have family in another city, it's really hard to move once you get placed somewhere. And so here in the Akron area, we have probably around 16,000 refugees that have been resettled here through the years.
Wow. Is that an above average, or is it really, like I think you may have said, it was kind of based on manufacturing and what jobs are available is how that disperses? Because I know I've read in some of the research that I've done is, which it's probably a little bit dated, but I know up to 2021 in that year that they had never, like in the state of Alabama, there was apparently no refugees that were brought into our state
That's
or into
correct.
Mississippi. And there were a couple others, but it seemed like Texas and California were just overloaded with refugees.
Yeah.
So I mean, is that, like I said, is that based off job opportunities? Is it based politically? How does that work?
So it's a good question. Basically, what happens is, again, cities can decide if they want to have an organization that resettles refugees, and so the cities, Akron, um, even though we have about 16,000 refugees, that's really not a lot compared to some other places. Other places have much more. Now, remember, we're talking just about refugees. We're not talking about immigrants. We also have an immigrant population. But so
Okay.
when you get into Texas, California, they do resettle refugees in Texas and California, but they also have a large amount of immigrants
Okay.
that are there too. So sometimes the numbers, again, that's part of the issue when someone says, "Oh my goodness, there's this many millions of people in the United States." They're lumping all of those four categories together instead of
Yeah.
parceling them out. And so of the four, there's the fewest is refugees. So the reason we know that is because every president has the authority to set the number of how many refugees we're going to invite every year. So the most any president has ever allowed into the country is 125,000.
Mm.
So that's the 125,000 refugees that are resettled across the United States.
Right.
So refugees, if you um, as far as the millions of immigrants that are in the United States, refugees are the smallest number of that group, and they've been vetted the most.
Wow.
And so when
So
they come here, Yeah. So when they come, again, they get 90 days of federal assistance. So that federal assistance, the way it works is before. So in 2025, the refugee resettlement was completely shut down. That started in January of 2025. Prior to that being shut down, when a refugee came to the United States, they got approximately $1,300 for every member of their family for 90 days.
Mm.
So if you were a single person, a single refugee, you came with no family, your first 90 days, the only assistance you got was $1,300.
Okay.
So
Wow.
that's supposed to cover your rent, your food, you need
Yeah.
clothes, so your utilities, all of that. Well, you can realize that until you get to a family of 4, 5, 6 people, it's
Mm-hmm.
financially not possible to
Right.
resettle unless there's an organization like the International Welcome Center, which and there's others. We're not the only one. We're a very small organization, but organizations come alongside them and fill in the gap. So in that first 90 days, basically what's happening is they're getting a social security number, they're getting established with a doctor, they're finding a place to live, they're getting established, and then they're expected to get a job because on day 91 they're supposed to start paying for themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with them getting a job and paying for themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
90 days that's a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
It
Quick
is.
turnaround. When you don't know the language, you don't know the system. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's so that was the heart behind the International Welcome Center in starting. Was we actually developed when we first opened our doors. We said we're here for day 91 moving forward
That's good.
because we weren't a resettling agency at the time. And so when we opened up, there were four things that were our goal. It was to help them learn English, help them to learn how to drive, help them to make their house a home, and then we provided legal services at a reduced rate, so they could stay on a path of citizenship
Mm.
and eventually become a citizen. So a refugee can't become a citizen until they've been here 5 years. So
Wow.
if everything works like it's supposed to, they come within a year. They can apply for their green card. Once they get their green card, in 4 years after that, they can apply to become a citizen. And you
Mm.
can't do it without a lawyer.
Nope.
So if you're working a factory job up here in Ohio, you go to work at a factory, it's going to be around anywhere from $14 to $18 an hour. Typically, if you have a family of four, that's going to be mom and dad both working because they can't pay rent and utilities on one person making $17 an hour.
Wow.
So mom and dad's both working. They're paying their rent. They're paying for their clothes, whatever they need. Well, there's no money
Mm-hmm.
left for a lawyer. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where the Welcome Center would come in, and we provided legal services at a much reduced rate, um, so that they could stay on their path to citizenship.
Wow.
Well, so that
Such a
brings
unique.
up an interesting question, Pastor Cary.
Yeah.
Let's if a refugee comes into the United States and receives the help from the government and is working on getting settled, but they don't continue on the path to citizenship,
Mm.
Mhm.
what happens then?
So that's a great question. So sometimes, especially before 2025, a lot of times we would hear on the news, "There's no path to citizenship."
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
not true for refugees.
Okay.
Refugees are actually on a fast track to citizenship. There is a clear path for a refugee to follow to become a citizen. So what happens, CJ, is let's say they come and they get their green card. They get that within a year. I personally haven't worked with any refugee who didn't get their green card, and they want to be here. And they appreciate the opportunity to start over.
Mm.
Um, so it's not, again, a lot of times in the news, when they lump all immigrants together, they talk about the worst of a bunch, which is a small percentage of the population, and they apply it to the whole crowd. It would be
Mhm.
like doing that with any ethnic group. It would be like saying, there's some white people who don't pay their bills, who are lazy, and they live off the system, and so that all white people must be like that. Well, we know that's not accurate.
Mhm.
That's not accurate of immigrants either. It's not an accurate representation. But refugees, typically, because they've been invited to the United States, um, they see this as a tremendous opportunity. And I we had before the podcast here tonight, we had one of our refugee friends over for dinner, and he sat at the table and was talking about the fact that coming to America for him was a miracle. I mean, it was a miracle in his life, uh, because where he was a completely hopeless situation. So they want to become citizens. It's just not easy to do, and life is hard. And so what happens is typically they get their green card. A green card is good for, I want to say, 10 years, and then you just reapply for it again. And as long as they don't commit a major crime, there'll never
Mhm.
be an issue with that individual. Um, but obviously, without citizenship, they can't vote, they can't run for office. So
Mhm.
there's certain privileges that come with being a citizen. So that's why we would come along beside them and say, "Hey, let's carry this through. Let's not stop with getting our green card. Let's go all the way and become a
Yeah.
citizen," which is ultimately what they want to do. It's just a long, difficult, somewhat costly process.
Mm.
That it
That was
is.
one of the things that I found out was that I think people think that a lot of, let's just say, immigrants. I know that that's lumping it into one, but even refugees, or what have you, that people think that they're coming in for free. Um,
Yeah.
there may be in some aspects that they're not paying for certain things, but also people don't understand how much money it costs for them to go through the program and to be able to be eligible to be able to come into our country.
Right.
Do you have an idea, Pastor Cary, on what that looks like? The cost that is associated with it, and do they have to have sponsors or the things like that for them to even be able to come into the country?
Not refugees. Refugees do not.
Okay.
So, couple of questions there. So, here's one thing a lot of people don't know. When a refugee is invited to the United States purchases them a plane ticket, and they fly to the United States. But the understanding is they have to pay for their plane ticket within a year after they get here.
Mm.
And the reason they do that is to help them to establish a line of credit, which is important. So even refugees don't even get here for free. They are expected to pay for their own plane ticket through a small loan that is set up in their name when they come. So the cost of it is going to overall cost. Um, depending upon, well, at the IWC, I would say that from before 2025, January of 2025, it, again, just the legal fees altogether is going to be less than $10,000, but that's over 5 years, not at one time, and that's
Yeah.
just to become a citizen. They've got all the expenses of life along the way too.
Yep.
And that's per person.
That's
Per
correct.
person.
That's
Mm.
correct. That's
Wow.
correct.
No.
Wow. So
So
it's
it's a tough journey.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I think it's still really important. I want to go over this again. It's really important to differentiate the narrative that you're hearing in the media is
Mhm.
not always the truth. Because what
Right.
you're hearing in the media is all the people coming in are illegal immigrants, and they're all, uh, depending on the system, receiving thousands of dollars each month from the government. But you just heard it from Pastor Cary that that's not the case. We can't lump everybody together.
For refugees. And I'll tell you, and this is, and listen, I'm not saying there was nothing wrong with our immigration system.
Right.
It was clunky, it was inefficient. There were many things broken in it. But when someone says something along the lines of, oh, those individuals come here and they drain the system, I would push back by saying they don't even know the system to drain yet. They don't know about the networks that are available in the United States. Not when they first get here. Now, after they've been here a year or two, yeah, they're probably going to figure out, oh, but you don't see a refugee doing that. Refugees become immediate taxpayers. They get a job and they start paying taxes just like everybody else.
Wow.
That's very interesting. I feel like I've been enlightened a little bit because I knew the narrative wasn't true. I just didn't know the truth.
This just gets left out. And again, when we're talking about our country, and the way things are gaslit, that's kind of that's the way everything. It's not. I mean, I know we're talking about immigration tonight, but the tactics that are used in talking about immigration, those tactics are used in talking about a lot of topics.
Yes.
And so it's not just immigration that this is happening to, but from a standpoint of working with refugees, I realize there's really nothing I can do to change what's happening at the national level.
Right.
All I can do is serve the person that's right there in front of me and figure out the best way to help them where they are. And so I think sometimes what happens to us believers, us Christians, is that instead of trying to change our neighborhoods, we're trying to change the nation, and he didn't call us to change the nation.
That's good. That's right.
He just called us to make a difference in our neighborhoods. And so we come along beside the people who are here in front of us. It would be really hard in the state of Alabama to serve refugees because there's not any. They're not there. But there are immigrants there. And so we find ways to serve those individuals, not to make our country better, but to make Jesus great among the nations.
Yes.
And I think that's where sometimes the church loses focus a little bit, is we get a little wrapped up in the politics of what's happening nationally. And you can watch something on the news and they're rioting in some city 6 states from you, and they make it sound like it's happening in your neighborhood. And that's just not true. That's not what's happening, but that's what we hear. And unfortunately, that's what immigration.
That is very, very true. And that's something that me and my wife have actually kind of been dealing with in our own lives as well, because we recently just moved to the little small town of Trafford, Alabama. And there's obviously it's well known that Trafford has, there's a lot of poverty. I don't know how many, immigrants are in Trafford. But I think that, and like you said about the church is trying to, and nothing wrong looking at the big picture of things, but I think we're going about the process the wrong way. We're trying to head it off from such a large standpoint from, millions and millions of people, and it's these local churches that are talking about it, when the local church needs to be focused on the local community. And through making changes in our local community, that's when you're going to start seeing nationwide and eventually worldwide changes and things that benefit the body of Christ. And so here locally in our town, I recently, I've never been into politics, anything like that. I'm not a politician by any means, but I've recently, signed up to be on the council for our local government here. And so it's a new world for me, but I felt like that we're lacking that so much, that we're trying as a Christian, we're trying to run so far from that. And I think, that we need to be able to be a representation. And sometimes you may be the only representation on a council.
Yeah.
And you may encounter some difficult situations, but, God has put you there for that moment. And, we're called to be a representation of him. So
For sure.
I think it's
For
very
sure.
important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, Pastor Cary, you talked about it a little bit about how the church, especially in America, views immigration and immigrants. I don't know about you guys, and I don't know about you listening, but honestly, I don't care what the right says, and I don't care what the left says. I care about what God says, because we're not here for the left or the right. We're not here for the red or the blue. We are here to build the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. So I want to know what the kingdom says. Pastor Cary, what does the Bible say about immigration and immigrants and all these issues that we see in the news today?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to start by acknowledging that even, in the New Testament, we find Paul and Peter specifically writing and saying, hey, you're like someone passing through this world. You, where you are, this place is not your home. This place, you're a sojourner. You're someone that's passing through. Well, that kind of language is the language of someone that's moving through. They don't have a home, and so they're moving through an area that they're not from. And spiritually, that's how we're supposed to view ourselves in this world. Spiritually, I'm not from this place, so I'm not supposed to get too comfortable with it. And so if you take that and you look at what's going on around us, we're bumping into people who are not from this place, and so how are we to treat those individuals, those around us who are not from here? They're not one of us. So the very first time, it's in Exodus 19, is it's shortly, it's one of the first commandments that we find in the scriptures. It says that we're to love the foreigner like we love ourselves. I think that's Exodus 19:11, in that vicinity, and that's the first time in the Bible that we're given instruction on how to treat people who are not from here, and you run into them. They're not from where you're from. We are to love them as we love ourselves. And so from that, the Bible expands on how to treat people who are different than us. And of course, it runs the gamut of the people, the characters that we find in Scripture who were immigrants themselves. Moses was an immigrant. Joseph was an immigrant. You have, the Israelites were in Egypt as immigrants. Jesus at one point was an immigrant when Mary and Joseph fled with him as a child into Egypt. There's someone who left their country to go to another country. So we could go on and on finding different individuals, different characters within the scriptures who at one time or another, or maybe permanently, were immigrants physically where they were. And yet God used them in such a mighty and powerful way. And it's a shame today. I mean, seriously, if Jesus was born today and needed to come to America, he couldn't get in.
It's very true.
So, I mean, and it's hard to take the commands of Scripture and make a national policy out of it. That's not what the Bible was written for. The Bible wasn't written for as a manual for a country to follow. It was written as a love letter for individuals to follow. And individuals make up a community. And individuals make up eventually the laws that govern those communities. And so the influence of Scripture, in my opinion, doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up. As people allow the Word of God to change them, that's how they begin to live their life where they are. And then God is the one who determines how much influence they're going to have over others. And I get it. We live in a society that tells us, everyone has a voice. But I can get on Facebook and say all kinds of things, but I'm not going to change the country because I don't have the influence. God hasn't given me the influence to change my country. He has given me influence in my community. And that's how I think we're supposed to work when it comes to how do we treat the people around us who are not one of us.
Yeah.
Wow. That's absolutely right.
So good.
Wow. I just don't know what to say. I feel a little convicted, honestly, because I think we're all guilty of maybe treating people who aren't the same as us a little differently than we should.
Yeah. And it was easy to do. And unfortunately, now we're living in a culture that actually is promoting it a little bit more. And so that makes it even harder to recognize, oh, hey, I'm not supposed to act like that. I'm supposed to be different. And so, we try real hard at the International Welcome Center when we work with our volunteers and we're training them to work with the refugees. We make it real clear the goal is not necessarily to help them complete a task. The goal is to become their friend. And then if you're their friend, you're going to become their natural advocate. And they're going to naturally call you, not because they need something from an American, they need help from their friend.
Right.
And then it's a whole dynamic. From there, we get the opportunity to share Jesus with them. We get the opportunity to share our faith with them. But that takes years because many of them do not have the English skills to even listen to a gospel presentation. So it's got to be shown to them before really it'll ever be explained to them.
Wow. So I guess it's a fair statement just to say that you use the International Welcome Center as a vehicle to share the gospel.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
To build the kingdom.
Absolutely. And we come along individuals. We have the opportunity to serve them and to become their friends. Refugees in particular have a lot of trauma in their lives. They've seen things that we only watch in the movies and get up and walk away from. They've lived it. Many of them have survivor guilt. They survived. The rest of their family didn't. Some of them, they got chosen and they're here in the United States, but the rest of their family didn't get chosen, and they're still in the refugee camp. And so they live with that, and many of us can't even fathom what that feels like. Again, the guy that was here tonight at my house, he's here. His wife and child are still on the continent of Africa. They're in a refugee camp in Kenya, and they're currently they will not be able to be reunited, and no one really knows when that might be a possibility again. And we just don't live with that kind of trauma, generally speaking.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I think people speak out way too quickly, obviously, and don't understand the full implications of of what they're even saying. Like you're talking about, where we just, as Americans, we're so Americanized,
Yeah.
that we just say things willy nilly, and not really thinking about it rationally. And that's something that obviously my wife, something that Lizzie talks about is that's the side of it from a motherly side
Yeah.
that she comes at this. I don't know if you want to share kind of your heart on that, but
Well, I mean, like you said, we don't have any refugees actually here. But the thing that we hear more about is the legal immigration stuff, and there's been more articles and things put out by AL.com a lot recently, and there's been people from where we're from, Blount County, articles about them. And I used to teach in Blount County, and I'll talk to him about some of the people. I'm like, I don't know, that could be like a brother or sister of someone that I taught. And like, that's the human aspect of it. That's the part that's not black and white to me. And so, like I said, we don't have refugees here, but we do have immigrants and, some illegal immigrants. And I want to come at it from a biblical way of how to help those people, how to show the love of Christ to those people. Because a lot of times I'm just hearing, I feel like, points from Fox News from people, and whatever. That's fine. Fox News has good stuff, but like, I don't need to just somebody quote me something from the news. Like, I want to know
yourself.
what we should be doing, like biblically, to love these people, even though they might not be here legally. So I'm just trying to tell him and other people, like, I feel like it's not just black and white.
No.
So
Yeah, I hear you. And it is challenging when you think of the national implications of immigration as compared to the community of what's happening in your community. And I would, just because you treat someone with respect and love them in genuine ways and help them, I mean, I don't know that we're setting a national precedent when we do that. We're just being a good human to another human, and looking for that opportunity for that person to look at us and say, why are you being so kind to me? Why are you being so good to me? And then we can say, well, this is why. I think one thing for me in my own journey of thinking about some of these things, because listen, I did not get involved in the whole immigration and refugee effort, until I was in my late 40s. And so prior to that, I probably may have had some different thoughts, but I don't know that my behaviors were all that different from anybody else when it came to rubbing shoulders with immigrants and with other people. But what happened to me was a couple of things. But the first thing that happened is when we lived in Sacramento, California for a while. There's a rather large immigrant population, refugee population in the Sacramento area, and the church I pastored there. One day I was in my office and a Ukrainian pastor came to visit with me, and they were looking for a place to worship, and he wanted to know if they could use our facility. So we arranged that. We set it up. He and we became friends. We had services on Sunday morning. They had their services on Sunday afternoon. And one day, again, after he'd been there a couple of years, he came back to me and he said, "Hey, I'm wondering if you would be willing to come and preach to my congregation." And I'm like, "Well, you guys, you worship in the Ukrainian language. I don't speak Ukrainian." He said, "Yeah, but," he said, "our kids want to hear it in English." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, our kids, they want to be Americans. Even though they're in Ukrainian families, they want to be Americans. And they want to hear the gospel in English." And that's when I first began to realize some of the struggles they were having. Because you've got two parents that are trying to hang on to their heritage, raising their kids in another country that are like, "I don't want to stand out. I want to blend in. I don't want to be different. I want to be like everybody else." And so that's where I had my first encounter with refugees and some of the unique struggles that they have. but then I got involved with another ministry that allowed me to go to the continent of Africa several times. And so, the result of that, I've been to Kenya, I've been to Tanzania, I've been to Uganda, I've been to South Sudan, um, and so being in those places, um, I got to see the refugee camps. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
so that that was very influential in shaping the way I I see some of this, because uh, these people, many of the people that are in refugee camps, they didn't do anything wrong. Something happened bigger than them, and it destabilized their country, and it put their family in harm's way, and they did the best they could to try to get out of that, and they can't go home. And so now they're in a place that basically confines them to a refugee camp, and there's no opportunity there. There's no jobs, there's no schools, there's no doctors. Um, it, it's pretty bleak,
Yeah.
and then for them to have an opportunity to go to another country and start over. Um, it is a fresh start for them, but it is such a hard journey. Um, what a lot of people don't talk about, it's not brought up a lot, is that when a refugee, this is true for the United States. I don't know about other places, but when a refugee comes to the United States, usually by year 3, many of them are really struggling with suicidal thoughts because
Oh,
life is so hard. It is it is not what they saw in the movies.
Mm.
Um, I have a refugee friend. He's from Nepal. In Nepal, he was 1 year, he was teacher of the year in his country of Nepal. Here in the United States, he works at an Amazon factory. That's a big difference in career. I mean, he obviously loves being a teacher, but he'll never be a teacher in the United States.
Right.
He doesn't have qualifications. He doesn't have the education to do it. Um, and so now he works at an Amazon factory, and there's no shame in working at an Amazon factory.
Yeah.
It's just not easy when you're wired to be a teacher. And
Yeah.
and that's what happens to a lot of refugees. We have refugee friends right now that he's from Cuba, she's from Colombia, and they were both doctors here in the United States. He works for a janitorial cleaning company. She works for a laundering company that launders like tablecloths and doormats and things of that nature. But before they were chased out of their countries, they were doctors. They're never going to be a doctor here.
Hmm.
They're never going to do that. And so it's just an extremely hard life. They've lost so much, and yet at the same time they've been given this opportunity to start over, but they need someone to love them and help them for all the right reasons. And the best reason is hey, look, um, I'm I'm not even I'm a spiritual immigrant here. Um, so I'm going to help another immigrant the best that I can.
That's right. Wow. Well, Pastor Cary, if people watching want to either get involved with the International Welcome Center if you're local to Ohio, or if they want to help in other ways, maybe by donating, how do they do that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to do that is to jump on the internet and look up theiwc.org. That's THEIWC.org. And you can see all that we're doing there, all the work that's happening there at the International Welcome Center, and that's local to Akron. And I get that may not necessarily be high on someone who lives in the state of Alabama. But if you wanted to help out, there's a donate button there, and there's a way to donate. If you want to be involved in more of a national organization, I would look up World Relief. I believe they're worldrelief.net, and World Relief is a national faith-based organization that helps refugees across the United States.
Awesome. Well, we certainly appreciate that, and I know people will want to get involved after hearing you talk tonight. I know I've certainly changed my perspective on some things.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's always good to catch up with a pastor friend also. Anytime you're in Alabama, stop by and say hello.
I would like that very much. I appreciate that.
But Alex, I think it's time to introduce Pastor Cary to Robert.
Oh.
What do you think?
Oh, Lord.
To who?
To Robert.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I bet you guys didn't know that we had a sponsor for tonight's episode, but we do. Y'all watch this.
Robert down here at the Cracker Barrel. More fun than a barrel of crackers. Look here. That's America. Yeehaw, America. We gotta love America, y'all. Tell you what, this is the best place to eat and shop I've ever seen. Remember, it's 25% off of America at the Cracker Barrel, where it's more fun than a barrel of crackers.
Listen, do not go ask for that discount at your local Cracker Barrel. That was fake, okay?
Oh, wow.
That's pretty good. He kind of looks familiar with somebody.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, that's great.
Well, before we say good night, Alex, Lizzie, is there anything you guys want to say?
No, I'm very thankful, Pastor Cary. I know this is such a unique topic within the body of Christ that honestly you don't hear a whole lot about. I know it's obviously a sensitive subject on both sides for a lot of people. The last thing I guess that I would just say is what would be the number one thing, just really quickly, what would be the number one thing that you would say that people could do that are listening that could help? What would that be?
Well, right now in our current culture, I would say if you are near someone who's not from America, I would say the best thing you do is just be kind to them and be a friend to them if you can. That doesn't mean you're breaking any kind of national law or you're betraying your country or you're setting some kind of national precedent. Take that opportunity to get to know someone, listen to them, hear their story, and then love them like Jesus would if he was there. And I think that's the best thing we can do in our neighborhoods. Just in our neighborhoods. And if you want to try to do something at a more statewide level or national level, then obviously you can write your state representatives and your senators, but I would write intelligent letters. Do a deep dive on what immigration is and what it isn't before you just start spouting things, because that's not productive.
Okay. You're absolutely right. Well, Pastor Cary, anything else you want to say before we end the live stream tonight?
No, listen, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. It was really nice meeting Alex and Lizzie. It's nice meeting both of you. And CJ, my goodness, man, when you told me how old you were, I feel the need to go get a cane or something and start walking around. It made me feel pretty low. But it's really good to see you, and thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, Pastor, I'm glad to have you on. I'm glad you're doing so well up there in Ohio. And tell your wife and children we said hello down here from Alabama.
I sure will. Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, we appreciate you watching. Thank you for watching the very first episode of Unfiltered Live. We will have more episodes for you to see, so make sure you are subscribed and make sure you turn on the notifications so you'll know when we go live. Thanks, guys, and have a good night.
God bless.